Hello there, it's Liam from Unique Cars and Parts, and if you're watching this channel, there's a good chance you've watched Tyler Hoover from Hoover's Garage, one of my favourite YouTubers. And what Tyler does, for those that are unfamiliar with it, is he goes out and he adds to what he calls his hoopty fleet, and he goes and buys one of the cheapest, sort of more exotic, high mileage cars. And the first place he takes it to is his car mechanic, and he calls him the Wizard. And he's always surprised at how much it's going to cost to get the car repaired and so on. In this case, I can't afford to do that. I mean, he's got nearly 800,000 subscribers. I've got 200 subscribers. So I've brought my own E46 in, and I've parked it next to an E90, and I'm going to ask if my car mechanic, henceforth known as Steve, to come in and have a bit of a chat about what the difference is between the E46 and the E90, and which we think is the better of the two. I've got to say, I sometimes think that the E90 looks a bit smarter, certainly interior-wise, but driving them is a little bit different, and Steve and I will go over that, and we'll also talk about some of the things to look out for on either model. Now, just recapping for those of you who are unfamiliar with the lineage of the 3 Series, the first 3 Series came out with the E21, and that was in 1975, and that was followed in 1982 by the E30, and then we start to get into the territory that I think, to my mind, is the most collectible of all of the 3 Series, and that's the E36. And of course, that model introduced the M3, and that was introduced in 1990 and went through to 1997. So a bit of a trend there. Everything seems to be running around about 9 years for each model change, and nothing was different with the E46. The E46 introduced in 1997, and it was finally replaced in 2004 by the E90. Now, with the E46, the chief engineer was Wolfgang Siebart, and the designer was Chris Bengal. And the exterior was done by a bloke called Eric Goplin of Design Works, which was a USA company. And Chris Bengal and Wolfgang Rietzel, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Wolfgang Rietzel developed the sedan's exterior. So we're looking at the E46 sedan here. And what they were chiefly, one of their chief things that they wanted to achieve with the E46 was to make it look a little bit more muscular than the previous E36 model. Now this particular one that I've got is it's got the M pack on it. Or I wish it was an M3, but it is just a 325i. So it came in European spec to Australia. The American engine, 2.5 litre 6-cylinder, was down a little bit on power, but the European spec, the same as this one, was good for 141 kilowatts. And this model in 2001 replaced the previous 323. So from 97 to 2001, there was the 323, and then it became the 325i. And I'd like to introduce my mechanic, and he's hidden in a secret location in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, and his name's Steve. Steve, if you'd like, I've been taking away from repairing cars all morning. G'day, Steve.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So now you've been looking after this E46 for 3 years. That's about how long I've owned it.
That's correct, yes.
And we've had a few issues with it, and given that it's only done a little over 20,000 kilometres, it's quite surprising that it's had some of the issues that it's had. All 4 window regulators have had to be replaced.
Yeah, and that's not unusual on this particular model because there's some plastic componentry within the mechanisms, and over time it just fails and breaks. And it's new window lift mechanisms, which is a real shame because it's very common to do them, and not just one but all 4. So a bit of a disappointment.
It's surprising because with a car with so few kilometres, you think wear and tear on a car that had done a couple of 100,000 kilometres, but one that's done 20, it's almost like the plastic in them is disintegrated over time, regardless of the amount of use it's had.
Yes, it's what you call a weak link. Certain model cars have certain items that you continually replace or they come back, whether it's a water pump failure or wheel bearings on one particular model I remember still fail, and you see them on the side of the road after they fail. But with this particular vehicle here, one of the weak things in it is the window lift mechanisms, and unfortunately that's just a cost of owning the car.
We've had taillight issues, we've had air conditioning issues, but that's been about it, I think, apart from just the general maintenance of it.
Being a low-K car, it doesn't have a lot of the issues that you see when cars get up with high kilometres. So it's all been just very, very small things. Air conditioning. You see air conditioning problems on these vehicles where they'll have a small leak, very, very hard to find, locate. Been known to happen. A lot of people experience it. Again, just a small nuisance thing that comes up. The tail light issues, it's not uncommon to see on the road. You pull up behind one and the brake lights are not working and everything. And, we do a bit of a modification there and put an extra earth on, which seems to help them. Stops the check light coming on the dashboard for saying you've got a brake light out, and they also work. So,
and have you got a good memory here, Steve, because you've done that to this car?
Yes.
You remember doing that?
Yes.
Yes. Which is really annoying, having a warning light on your dash, knowing that everything's working perfectly well.
Yeah, it's just a car comes in and it's got a problem with the brake lights. You just do it automatically. That way, the customer doesn't come back with a complaint. So that's what we're looking for.
Okay, so now these cars are these days, around about the $7,000 to $10,000 mark is going to get you a reasonable one. And there's not much you can buy for 7 or 10 grand that's going to have a German badge on it. And these have got a bit of a cult following with the young'uns now because they can afford them. What have they got to look forward to as far as problems?
Well, they do like these cars, and a lot of the younger people are buying them, but they do come with some costs involved. Higher mileage, of course. There's a lot of wear and tear that's happening to the suspension. Oil leaks, as the seals that they use on the engines are rubber seals, and the rubbers over time's just gone hard through age and everything. So they'll leak oil. Transmissions are okay, but if they fail, they're very, very expensive to repair. So you've just got to be careful what you get. You've just got to try to get a good one. Lower the Ks, the better, definitely. The other weak point inside them is the audio systems. There's a button on the radio, the on-off button, and it's very small, very plasticky again, and they have a habit of failing. I'm happy enough to say in this particular vehicle, the very poor audio system's been removed and a fantastic audio system's put in, where anyone who's got one of these vehicles will know that AM radio just doesn't work because the aerial built into the rear window, that you just can't get reception, where by replacing it with a different head unit that allows you to get digital radio, all of a sudden you've brought the car up into a 2015 model spec car.
And with the AM radio, if you do add window tinting, as I found out, and then if you turn on the rear demister, AM is out of the question.
Yeah, no, it's just no good. I mean, unless you're somewhere where there's nothing around at all, it works. But even then, it's not a real strong signal. But as soon as there's any electrical interference around, you've just lost it.
Now, I've kept the original speakers in this, but to give it a bit of bass boost so that I make the speakers, I guess, do the mid-range, and I've turned down the bass on it, and I've put a woofer under the passenger seat. Were you aware of that, Steve?
No, I wasn't, but I knew the sound system sounded really good, and I know the speakers have got limitations. I just thought the head unit was lifting the sound quality, but if you have a look at the E90, bass speakers under the seats are standard on those.
Okay, so let's look at the E90, because I guess if you're looking at a second-hand BMW, these are newer and probably look a little bit more modern, and you would think most punters would say, let's go for the E90 over the E46, and you could understand why. But would you buy an E90, given these two cars are very low kilometres? If I said, Steve, you can take one home and it's yours to keep, which set of keys would you be reaching for?
Well, before I answer that, I'll come back to one question I'll ask you. When you look at these on the market, the cost difference between the two models is sometimes, what I've found, are almost the same price. Is that what you would say?
I would agree. And that's why I think most punters would say, why not get a sort of a newer, more modern looking car?
Yeah, so most people would look at that and say, well, I can get a later car for better dollars. But there's definitely some limitations in getting an E90, as in that, my opinion is it doesn't drive as well, because the E90 was the first ones that went on to run flat tyres. And the run flat tyres changed the whole driving characteristics and not so much the handling when you're putting it through a corner, but just the normal daily drive where you're driving to and from work, and that. It's not as comfortable, in my opinion, in an E90 compared to an E46. I would have an E46 over an E90. The electronics that they put in this vehicle, if they give trouble, they can be very expensive, where everything's really simple in this. It hasn't gone to that next step. Drive, handle, brakes, really, really nice. Few issues, as we were talking about, with oil leaks, transmissions when they get high Ks, expensive, but really, really nice car to drive. The only thing that's against them now is that the interiors are starting to deteriorate, again, just through age.
Steering. I wanted to talk to you about steering because there was a fundamental shift in the way they set up the steering on these. Both rack and pinion, both power steering, of course. However, this is mechanical hydraulic, and that's electric motor hydraulic. And often when people say it's got electric steering, it's still hydraulic, isn't it? It's just an electric motor that's...
No, it's an electric motor that just drives the rack back and forth.
I thought it was an electric motor that drove a hydraulic pump.
Not on this.
Not on the... Okay.
Not on this model.
Explains, because I've driven a few of these later model BMWs, and the first thing that springs to mind is it just doesn't feel right at the steering.
The feedback through the electric power steering is nowhere near the same as the hydraulic. That's another reason why I would pick the E46 over the E90. And that's another reason why my car has hydraulic steering, where if I purchased the model afterwards, it would have electric. And just the feeling's just not the same. So, you know, the hydraulic steering, don't give any problems with it. Occasionally see a power steering pump fail due to when they've manufactured it, there's just not quite enough material on the shaft. So you'll see some of those. I'll just stop, but a lot cheaper to repair than if anything fails on the electric one. But yeah, just the run flat tyres and the electric power steering, just the way the car drives and feels, in my opinion, is nowhere near as nice as a good E46.
And this is a good E46, you'd say?
This is an excellent E46.
Well looked after by myself. Moi?
It's well looked after. It's low Ks. It's a fantastic colour in this Esterol blue. Some additional features are inside it. Just make this vehicle a better vehicle than a standard E46 you'd find out there.
A standard white one, for example.
But standard white one or a standard base model.
Yeah. Now, you were saying that this was a special order because Esterol blue didn't come out as stock from the factory in Australia.
Yeah. This car's actually been ordered as a individual, and that's allowed them to order the Esterol blue paint. If memory serves me correctly, the Esterol blue at the time of this release was only available on the M3s, unless you had a M division build a special one for you. Or
should I put an M3 badge on the back of it?
No.
Well, there you have it.
No M3 badges.
Yes. Okay, so Steve, if you had an E90, or you were looking at buying an E90, you just felt the E46 was a little bit too old, too long in the tooth. Is this going to have the same sorts of issues as this? Because the plastics, I think, inside the engine bay are one of the areas where a lot of people are critical of them.
Well, yeah, the radiators and the plastic around there, as time goes by, and the plastic fittings, they're getting to a point now where they're starting to deteriorate. Old days, you had aluminium fittings that never gave you the same amount of trouble, but the plastic now is just starting to become very hard, very brittle, and as soon as you touch it as a mechanic, it tends to just fall apart in your hands. So a simple replacement like a thermostat can all of a sudden creep up into greater costs because of the other plastic componentry that is around it.
The same plastic componentry, I'm going to guess, is on the E90.
It appears to be the same material, so I'll be expecting the same sort of deterioration of materials to occur about the same time frame.
So if you were buying an E46 now, would you be thinking that most of the problems would have been ironed out from the previous owner, or would you be worried? And if you were worried, how could you tell what had been done exactly?
I think the problems are still there, because it's a time and a distance thing, so things will deteriorate. So when you're buying one, you want to find one that's been looked after and serviced well. And that's the thing. Cars that don't get serviced are always a problem, because just the oil itself, the oil breaks down over time, it becomes contaminated. The very, very long service intervals are really putting a lot of stress on the oil, so that by the time it's due for service, the oil is at the end of its life.
And of course, these cars being cheaper, obviously people usually are spending less on a motor car, spending less on maintenance, which means that they're running them into lots of kilometres over what the...
That's right. And what we're seeing sludge. We're seeing people that miss the service intervals, not even by a lot, but by a little. And what they're finding is that the oil is starting to sludge, and then once the sludge gets into the engine, it just deteriorates it and the engine noises, and it also seems to contribute towards leaks. A lot of sludge, you always see there's just oil coming out everywhere, out of all the gaskets of the engines, and it just becomes an expense.
Okay, so you're behind the wheel of an E46, or for that matter, an E90. You think about buying it and you're taking it for a test drive. What, as a mechanic, would you be listening out for as you took that for a short drive?
Well, you'd listen for any noises in the engine, and you'd be looking for how the transmission shifts, whether you're detecting any slip or anything in it. The other thing is that as you're driving it, you'd be paying a lot of attention to the front suspension, because there's some rubber bushes in the front suspension that wear, and they move during normal operation, but they end up moving a little bit too much as they wear out, and you'll feel clunking through the steering as you're braking, turning. And then the rest of it's purely going to be visible. You're going to be looking to see whether the engine has got any oil leaks, how the trim is inside, whether the windows go up and down, as we've spoken about previously, and just the general condition of the car, because to get parts for these things from wreckers are getting hard. So second-hand parts are at the same level as these. So if the steering wheel's worn out, it's more than likely to be worn out on a car at the wreckers as well. So keeping them maintained is becoming more difficult.
I'd like to thank Steve for doing a great interview and letting us into a mechanic's insight into the E46 and the E90. And I wanted to finish on one thing that we were discussing just a few weeks back, and that is I replaced the battery. I took it down to Battery World in Moorabbin, got a new battery put in it, and when they pulled it out, they said, "Oh my God." And I said, "Well, what's the matter?" I was thinking that there was some. He said, "Look at the manufacture date on this." And it was 2002. So it was the same battery that was fitted to the car when it was shipped from. Were these made in Germany or South Africa?
Now, these were made in Germany. And if it's a Varda battery and it's done that sort of life, it's almost a record.
Yes. Yet you said it's just as well that I did replace it, because we were able to jump start it and it'd last for a week. But you said that's when it's getting into dangerous territory, because it could easily set fire to the car or catch fire.
Yeah, usually when batteries get not usually, when you see a battery fail, it's usually a very old battery where they collapse inside. And when they can collapse inside, they can short out and they can get hot and they can catch fire. I've never seen anything that's a newer battery, like a 3, 4, 5 years old battery, cause a problem, but older batteries I have, and they do it without warning. And that's, again, something you need to be aware of, and don't try to get every ounce out of a battery. It gets to a point where you just need to replace it.
We were trying to get every ounce out of it.
Every ounce out of it.
But yeah, so what should we be looking at, rough, the ballpark? So from I've just replaced it 4 years. 4 years now I should replace it.
4 years. 4 years is all my customers. We look on a 4 year less earlier, but 4 years is good. You don't get left on the side of the road, not being able to start the car. And
see, that's regardless of you. So if you've got a collector car that you keep in a garage and you take it out on the odd weekend when it's good weather, you're still going to say to them 4 years?
Yes, yeah, still say 4 years, because even though you maintain it and everything, the chemical reaction that's happening inside the battery is still happening, whether you're using it or not. So the deterioration does take place.
Okay. Well, Steve, again, thanks, mate. It's been great having a chat to you. I hope this have been of some use to some of you that might be looking at buying an E46 or an E90. So we've both decided we'd take the E46.
I'll take the E46. I just prefer the way it drives and handles. So the audio system, it's as good as anything you'll get on the road today.
Okay. Thanks again, Steve. Good on you, mate. Bye-bye. So I'm going to start again, because that might all be rubbish. I'm just going to start again. Hello, it's Liam from Unique Cars and Parts, and if you're watching this channel, there's not working, Steve?
No, I was just thinking that when I went through there, I was actually... I was just looking at the camera and the maps on the floor, and whether I...
You were pulling a face, and I thought, oh, he's not liking what he's hearing.
No.
I thought, oh. Hello, it's Liam. 3, 2, 1. No, I'll get it right this time. Hello, it's Liam from Unique Cars and Parts. If you're watching my channel...